Now, artificial intelligence, or AI, is becoming a game changer across industries and sectors. For executives, the question is no longer whether AI will fit into their business, but how they can reposition their organization to become AI-centric and fully capitalize on the transformational value of AI. For many organizations, harnessing the full potential of the concept usually begins with an exploration of a new few use cases which can deliver quick but valuable insights to set the pace for the journey to becoming an AI-centric organization. And a partner and lead for digital transformation, KPMG Africa, Boye Ademola, joins me in the studio for more on this. Boye, it's good to have you with us.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Neil.
Good evening. So there's a perception on poor quality of data gathered by businesses resulted in poor insight. What does this mean, and what's your take on it?
Well, what we see is that a lot of organizations are stuck with data cleansing. There is a lot of concerns around the quality of data organizations have. And people generally gravitate towards this situation of being helpless, cleansing data, or complaining about the quality of that data and being unable to get enough insights from the data. Our perspective at KPMG is focus on the business, all right? What should drive the AI journey should not be the quality of the data, but first, what's the business problem that the organization seeks to solve? From these business problems come what we call use cases. And a use case, to give an example, is, for instance, concern with customer churn. That's a use case. So I essentially drive what I'm doing on AI with an objective of reducing or minimizing customer churn. Another use case can be cost to serve or failure of certain critical equipment within my operations. A pump, for instance, an asset, an ATM. Measuring certain things that are important from a business perspective should give rise to use cases. And the use cases should then drive, what sort of data you need, all right, to get insights from that particular situation. So what we tell organizations is focus on the use case, not the data.
Indeed, interesting. Now, talking about availability of quantity of data to generate insight that businesses need from artificial intelligence, what are your views here?
Well, this whole quantity discussion is also interesting. We are generating tons of data every day. In fact, we've generated more data in the last 3 years than, since we started this whole data drive that we see globally. And what's causing this is, is looking at social media, is looking at the Internet of Things, the amount of data just from voice alone is staggering now. The amount of data from streaming. You have the millennials spending a lot of time on YouTube. So that's data that is being generated. So there is this whole question around, how about if I don't have enough data? What is enough? Enough is relative. And there is so much more data out there than you have in your organization. So to make AI work is important for organizations to understand that you're going to have to use a combination of data you have internally and the data that is out there externally. And a lot of data that is out there is available, many of them open source. You can get a lot, for instance, from Google. So it's a question of, what is enough data, not being bogged down by this whole concept of I don't have enough. There is tons of data out there, and it's a question of how you harvest it and, make it fit for business use.
Indeed. Still talking about businesses, what industries or functions is AI best suited for? We can use the Nigerian, scenario as a case study.
Well, my sense is that AI is industry agnostic, all right? We've seen a lot of use of, or we're beginning to see some use, let me not say a lot of use, some use of AI, for instance, in lending, in the banking industry.
That's the fintechs.
The fintechs working with banks, and doing that. Across Africa, for instance, we've seen Safaricom partner with KCB and with CBA, 2 banks in Kenya, to launch a product called Fuliza. Fuliza has been extremely successful in Kenya. It's an instant overdraft product, but it's powered by artificial intelligence. All right, so we're seeing these things in financial services. But it's important to note that AI is industry agnostic. You can use AI and apply it to supply chain, for instance. You can apply it to healthcare. You can apply AI to entertainment, where there's a lot of data now that we're generating. People are streaming movies increasingly. You can apply AI to education. We are beneficiaries of using AI for managing traffic in Lagos. So when you use Google Maps, that's AI. You're leveraging the power of artificial intelligence to help you with, managing the traffic situation. So it's industry agnostic. And, even though we may see quite a bit of it in financial services for starters, but we expect that we'll see other sectors leverage AI a lot more.
So to a large extent, would you say this is the opportunities with AI is limitless? It depends on the human perception of AI, as it were.
Limitless. We think it can be transformational. That's an important message. And by being transformational, we mean you can get insights from artificial intelligence that will provide value that is so much more than we're doing today, from gut feel, rule of thumb, and those type of ways of making decisions. With AI, we can, with making the right investments, take decisions that are so much more transformation. And we're saying that should be the focus. That should be the focus, is where we are today. And it would be incorrect to say there's not some analytics going on today across businesses. There is, people are sort of working the analytics at the descriptive level, sort of retrospective analytics. That's what we call descriptive, or it's diagnostic. All right, but where AI is today is that we can apply from a predictive, or better still, from a prescriptive perspective. So it's that's tied to what we call machine learning. If we have the right data, where the machine is able to learn from that data and help us make recommendations or take actions that are based on insights and able to prescribe or even, predict what exactly is going to be the future situation.
Indeed, interesting development there. So what types of talents are required on opportunities presented by the AI concept, and how readily available are these talents, you think?
We think the talent is a challenge. All right. In generally, data scientists, for instance, are part of the most sought-after professionals now in the US and in many developed markets. So, and then when you think about the current drain, the brain drain that we're also experiencing in Nigeria, we have a lot of professionals leaving, computer science people leaving. So there's quite a dearth of AI talent in our market. However, there's some good news, and that's the first thing we see is that our schools are producing a number of computer science graduates that are taking the personal time to invest in themselves. We are also beginning to see, institutions like Data Science Nigeria go on a social crusade to also help with building AI talent in our market. I think where we need to go with the educational curriculum is where we're seeing leading institutions now globally, where data science is now pretty standard to have a PhD program in data science. And we need to get to that point.
Did that exist before? Before now?
Before now, it was limited. It's pretty standard. So before now, the focus has been a lot around the computer science, computer engineering graduates. But now data science is an application of computer science that is really receiving a lot more attention. And we're seeing investments in that area. And I think it's got to be done by both, some sort of public-private sector partnerships. Because obviously of the investments to be made. First of all, from a curriculum perspective, we need to be able to do PhD in data science across the leading science institutions in Nigeria. And then hopefully we should be able to get endowments, student exchange programs, some of the leading institutions, supported by the private sector to accelerate this journey. So it's really important as a country we begin to invest in not just the data science, but also the engineering of data. That's also around how data is stored, how it's processed, and how it's managed in an efficient and scalable manner.
Very good. So what are implications of data privacy regulations on AI adoption globally and locally as well?
Well, the implications are, they're quite wide-ranging. And I think what we're seeing with privacy regulation is very interesting globally. I mean, if you look at Europe, for instance, data privacy regulation is probably strongest in Europe.
Indeed, we've seen what's happening with Facebook and all this
exactly,
data analytical
exactly,
as it were.
Exactly, and the sanctions and so on and so forth.
Very sensitive issue.
Very sensitive.
Indeed.
Yeah, but again, if you go to Asia, particularly China, you have a situation where the data regulation hasn't been as strong. But what we see is that there appears to be an inverse relationship between the strength of the regulation and creating an enabling environment for tech startups, for techpreneurs, and for the tech giants generally. So a lot of the tech giants we're seeing in financial services are coming out of China. And from studies, it appears that part of the advantage they have is that the regulation hasn't constrained innovation. So what's important, I think, here is that we have a data privacy regulation. There has to be compliance. Businesses know they have to comply with it. But I think more importantly as a country is we need to be clear about what we're trying to achieve with AI and the technology that supports that. For instance, financial inclusion is a big part of what we want to achieve as a country. Therefore, we need to make sure that the regulation does not stifle innovation, does not stifle that ability to make social impact by leveraging data. There's also a big discussion around who's the owner of the data. Ultimately, the owner of the data is the customer. And the businesses that hold customer data are custodians. And therefore, there's also a big discussion around data governance and how do we govern this data. We should have access to this data. We should be able to approve it, and so on and so forth. So all these are important considerations, but safe to say that we've made the right step. There's data privacy regulation, but it just needs to be balanced in such a way that we continue to encourage innovation and development in a way to promote social and economic impact.
You're right, encouragement is key here. And on that note, Boye Ademola, partner, KPMG Africa, many thanks for your thoughts on AI and its proliferation, as it were. It's good to have you.
All right, thanks for having me.